it into practice.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for telling me who you are, and it sounds like we have a wide range of experiences here. I think I'm going to focus more on the getting started part of things, but I'm hoping that some of you who have experience will be able to chime in and we'll get a few things out of this as well. So, and I'm so excited to see a few board members here. That's really great, and I'll speak to sort of your role as board members as well. So today, I think what we'll do is we'll start talking about the reasoning behind individual donor fundraising, and then how to get started with a focus on planning and finding new donors, and then wrap up with retaining your donors and increasing donor gifts. And we will have a fun, terrifying exercise at the end. Maybe I shouldn't say terrifying. It's terrifying for me, but we'll do it.
More comforting.
So it should be fun, and I welcome questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to interrupt me and clarify or ask any other further questions. So let's get started. So why individual donors? So what I'm hearing from a lot of you is that one of the reasons that you're looking to individual donors is because you need to either grow your organization or diversify your funds. So the thing about individual donor fundraising is that it's really hard, right? It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, it's unpredictable in a lot of ways, and it's really just sort of scary at the end of the day. So why do we even bother doing it? So I want to first make the business case for doing so, and it has to do with diversifying. So I heard that a lot of you have foundation grants, and it sounds like some of you have some government funding as well, and maybe some corporate funding. Does that sound right? So the reasoning behind bringing in individual donors into your mix is because those elements of funds that you have right now are not as predictable as they may seem. So first of all, in terms of foundations, they change priorities all the time. I've been in Denver for about 5 years now, and the Denver Foundation has changed priorities already in this time. The Rose Foundation constantly threatens to change their priorities, and there's so many other foundations that, you know, they're only willing to give you a year's worth of funds, and the next year is not guaranteed. So that's unpredictable. And then if you are a millennial like me, you have had your life shaped by these 3 presidents in your life. And if you're like me and your partner works for the federal government, you'll know that government funding is not always predictable as well. So we've seen huge roller coasters of funding even in the last 24 years, in the last years as Obama has taken over for Bush. So, and who knows what's going to happen next? I'm going to talk about that today. Okay. So, and then the last thing is around corporate giving and how unpredictable that is too. So, what I mean by gas prices in the Colorado philanthropic community, we have a lot of very generous oil and gas companies in the Denver market, just to name one industry. But as we've seen over the last year, when gas prices are volatile, they have less money to give out. So just to say that this is the reason that we can't guarantee funding through the usual foundations and the usual institutions. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions on that?
Yeah. So what's the connection between the gas and the foundation setting money?
So that's more about the corporate foundations. So if gas prices are volatile, the oil and gas corporations in our community give out less community investments. So, does that make sense?
Like Excel.
Yeah, like Excel, for instance. All right. Oh, and then, my roller coaster history came up. Okay. So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this fuzzy picture, but basically, this is to show sort of the overall contributions by every piece of the pie in the US, and this is in 2012, but it pretty much is stable throughout time. So you'll see the largest amount of money, and the largest amount of money comes from individuals. So even though, you know, what we hear are the foundation names, the corporate donors to events, to the organizations, the individuals are making up the backbone of the philanthropic community in the US. And I would say the other thing about this is that any individual can give, whereas foundations and corporations, you know, it's up to, they have different missions, they have different reasons for being, you know, in business. So it's a different feeling than an individual giving because they want to give. And then beyond the business case, I want to stress that, you know, the connection to individuals is more than getting funds from them. You're building relationships with people who care about your organization, your mission, and they're going to bring more assets than just their cash to your organization. So you've got loyalty, you've got passion, and those really come out in different ways through individuals. And we see that all through, you know, your board members and all the other folks who are a part of your projects. So bringing networks, bringing time, talent, and testimony to your organization is something that you're not going to see in other resources. The thing about this, though, is that individuals need to feel solidly connected to your project before they're going to part with these things. You know, they might give you a cash donation, but these are really the treasures that they will bring to your organization. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So now that I've convinced you to go on this journey with me, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get started. So before I move on, can I see a show of hands of who right now has a fundraising plan? So sorry. Okay, that's great. So, and who has individual donors as part of that fundraising plan? Good. So is there anyone who can tell me exactly how much they're going to raise from individuals this year? You get a star. Okay, great. All right. Well, I think that's, you know, part of where we have to start is really putting a plan together. So that's really my first place to begin. So the thing about planning around individual donor fundraising is sort of a black box. You've got other tools within your organization that you have to build your program and to build your mission that will help with fundraising. So first of all, the budget. You know how much you have to raise this year. You know how much you want to spend, and you might even have a stretch goal. Those type of things. Those are your goals for the year. So thinking about starting with that and the financial planning that went into doing that, and sort of backing out and figuring out from there how much you need from individual donors. Your mission plays a huge role, even though it may not seem like it on a day-to-day basis, but it gives you the boundaries to figure out, what you're fundraising for, who you're going to fundraise from, and it gives you the parameters to your plan. And then lastly, third, you're not creating an individual donor fundraising plan alone in a room, hopefully, away from what else is happening in the organization. So thinking about your strategic plan, where you want to go, where your vision is for your organization, and how you're communicating that with folks through a communications plan or these other aspects that you bring to the organization. Those are really, the fundraising plan should be interlocked with them. I think the thing that I see first is having a fundraising person or a volunteer or somebody go off and try to create this plan on their own. What that happens is there's a lot of communication that gets mismatched, and a lot of stuff sort of falls through the cracks. I think the worst thing that I saw was a grant that went in, I think this is sort of overall fundraising, a grant that went in that didn't match the mission of the organization. They got the grant, which is probably the worst thing that could happen, and seeing how that organization had to sort of change to meet that grant. The same as if for individual fundraising, you want to make sure that your communications with donors are aligned with the rest of the organization. And then thinking about some tools. Tools that you can use to help you plan. So I listed, there are a million tools. You can find them online for cheap or for free. But I've listed what I think are probably the most important to get started in an individual fundraising plan. So thinking about a database, it doesn't have to be fancy or expensive, but I think it should be one step above a spreadsheet, and really just capturing your contacts, their information, their last gift, and some notes about themselves. So, why they're interested in your project or your mission, how they got connected, and anything that you need to know about them. They only like to meet once a year. They don't like to meet at all. All those kind of things that make up the data for a relationship are the important things that you need to know and be able to communicate with other people in your organization. So a fundraising calendar and work plan. I was going to provide these, but I was actually just perusing online and realizing there were so many different ones that you can even find online. I would say, coming up with even a basic calendar of when are you going to send out your donor letters, when are your events, to make sure that you're planning for your work time, and also that you're not tripping over other program activities that are happening throughout the year. And then in terms of policies, I threw up 3 here that I thought were probably the most important. So a board donation policy, and I think this is probably what you have to do as part of a project, but making sure that your boards know what is expected of them about fundraising. So is that making a donation to the organization at least once a year? I hope so. And is there any expectation around them fundraising for the project? To make that into a policy is probably the best way to make sure that everybody's on the same page. I've seen board members leave organizations because they weren't comfortable signing that policy. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that needs to happen to make sure that everybody in the organization is bought in to what you're what your goals are. The donor acceptance policy is something to protect yourself and your organization and also protect the donor. So some questions that come up, do you accept gifts outside of cash? So do you accept stock gifts? When I was at Community Shares, this came up. You know, we wouldn't know what to do if you gave us a share of Microsoft. We had nobody to even give that to do anything with it. So we had to put it in our policy that we don't accept stock gifts. Do you accept gifts of in-kind gifts or gifts of cars and things like that? Or real estate. There's tons of things that may seem totally outside of your peripheral, but someday somebody's going to come up to you, maybe a board member, and say, hey, you know, I have this thing. Do you think you guys can use it? And this will protect you from having to say no to a relationship that you don't want to have a problem with. Yeah.
Are there examples of these policies we can access?
Yeah, so actually, thank you for that transition, but the Donor Bill of Rights, which I think all of you have a handout of, is developed by the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP, and their website has a lot of great resources, including donor acceptance policies, fundraising calendars and work plans and that type of thing.
So just, excuse me, I just want to chime in too that for the most part, CNDC can accept a lot of non-cash donations on behalf of our projects, but there are some restrictions on some of those. So probably a good place to start for everybody is just the handbook. In the resource development section, there's a list of you know, automobile donations and stock donations and all of that, and kind of give some guidelines.
Yeah, thanks. So your job is even easier than you thought. And then the last thing is the Donor Bill of Rights. And again, talking about protection of yourself and of the donor. For every fundraising job that I've held, I've actually tacked this up above my desk. And I do that for two reasons. One, it's a daily reminder to me of my expectations of how to behave to donors and to really philanthropic partners. So this really lays out, you know, how I'm supposed to act towards donors. Secondly, it's a reminder and an indication to any donors who come into my office that I respect them as a philanthropic partner, and that I have chosen to follow these guidelines. So they know what to expect of me, and I know what to behave to them. So does that make sense to folks? And there's a ton of different things like this, but the Donor Bill of Rights is pretty well known. So, and then the AFP website is a really great resource for a lot of policies and tools that you might be able to use. And AFP Colorado is a chapter of the larger organization, and they have a lot of resources and folks to help as well. Is that good? All right. All right, so finding the donors. I'm going to throw this back at you. So where do you think you can find new donors? No wrong answers.
Your networks.
Networks, yep, that's right.
Your board members.
Board members, that's right. Anything else? How many of you have clients? Yeah. How many of you have volunteers? How many of you have Facebook friends? Okay. Any other thoughts?
Community organization.
Community organizations, yeah. Good. Looking to existing supporters is probably where I would start. This is a huge untapped resource. Even if you think everybody in your circle, you don't. So thinking about board members especially, these other folks, they will definitely help you reach other people just by giving those time, talent, and testimony that I was talking about earlier. Board members, though, I want to spend maybe 2 minutes on. I think having board participation in fundraising is probably the most important piece of individual fundraising and the most challenging piece. I think it's the most important because if not them, who, right? So if your board members are not donating to the organization, if they're not sticking their neck out to bring their networks or their friends or family into the organization and asking them for money, who else is going to do it? They are the ones who are most closely aligned with the organization. So that's the most important reason. The most challenging reason is because board members are volunteers, just like many of you folks are. They come with their own quirks and their own things that they love to do, things that they don't like to do, their own expertise, things they don't know how to do. So meeting board members individually where they're at is probably the most challenging thing, but probably the most important thing. So, and I've experienced this in every organization that I've worked with. So, you have board members who say, I don't want to ask anybody for money. Well, will you send thank you cards? Sure, yeah, I could do that. Great, here's, some cards and stamps and addresses. Please just send thank you cards to our donors. Some people love to put on parties. Great, will you change one of your house parties to a fundraiser for our organization? We'll come, we'll give a speech, just invite your friends. That's a great way for them to introduce their networks to your project. So, and there are probably a million other ways to get them involved, but it's really meeting volunteers, not just board members, but all volunteers where they're at, making them feel and having them be a part of the fundraising plan and making sure that they are as invested in it as they are every other part of the organization. So, does anybody have any questions about that? If you're asking, yeah, but how do you actually do that? We can talk later. Okay. And I think I'm going to skip ahead, but I'm just going to put these 2 questions out here for, not for discussion, but just to think about. And I'll give you the answer to both of these questions. It depends. So social media may be a great tool to get people to follow you and to get your message out as you want your message to be crafted. You may not get a lot of dollars through social media, but you might get some new fans and new people involved with your organization that might end up being dollars. Events are events a good tool for recruiting new donors. I would say it also depends. It depends on what kind of event it is and what your goal is. I don't really think that there's any kind of event that's called a fundraiser. I think that if you're going to put on an event and put the time and the money into putting on an event for your organization, that there should be some sort of revenue generating coming from that. A lot of people are really afraid of that, but I think if you're going to put in the investment, there has to be something that comes out of it other than a list of names and emails. That's just my opinion. We can talk about that more later if you want. So, and then the last thing about getting started is really understanding what kind of donor you're looking for and the donors are coming to your organization. So this picture is a pretty generic donor pyramid. There's about 1 million different kinds, but they sort of fall into these buckets. So you have your sort of occasional donors, event participants, large group of small amount donors. So these people, represent the base of your donors, but they give very little amounts of money. And then the sort of building blocks of your donor base are these middle folks who are annual donors, who give regularly, give consistently, and give at a little bit of a higher amount than your occasional donors do. And then major donors, which we probably won't get too much into today, are those folks who give large sums of money at once, but there's only a few of them. So I'll decipher my arrows here, but so this means the further you go down, the larger number of donors you'll have, and then but they give smaller amounts of money. So the farther you go up, you'll get larger amounts of money, but you also have to invest more time in developing those relationships. Does that make sense to folks? And I've actually created this pyramid for a number of organizations that I've worked with, and it actually comes out well. So, all right, so 2 donors. So now that you got all of these amazing new donors, thinking about retaining them. And the issue with this, without getting into too much math, is that it costs 5 times more to get a new donor than it is to retain an existing donor. So, that's every 5 letters you send out, you're going to get 1 donation back. It's every 5 invitations you send out, you're going to get 1 person to come to your event. So thinking about that versus making sure that somebody who is already willing to part with their dollars for your project stays within your family. However, 70% of donors drop off after the first year. So does anybody have any thoughts around why that might be?
Maybe like the thanking process wasn't quick enough.
That's great, yeah. That's one thing.
Maybe they think you're up and running and you don't need their money anymore.
Okay. Seeming to be too stable and too sustainable.
Just from the perspective of someone who donates, I find it interesting that whenever you give anything, they always expect that you're gonna give it again and again and again, and that doesn't seem like a good assumption to me.
Yeah, just asking, being constantly asked for more donations. Yep.
It's so interesting that, because it makes so much sense. I mean, that happens to me when I donate. If you aren't cultivated, cultivating donors, as you say, that's such a strong part. And I may be very interested in the mission, but I'm interested in a lot of missions.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are people that say, wow, we appreciate this, that would give me more impetus to continue.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Yep.
I just think a lot of donors literally don't hear from the organization yet.
Yes, that's right. So you're all correct. I think a lot of it is this sort of cultivation piece, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So the key to this is the relationships that you're building. So yes, donor development is like relationships. Whenever I hear this from other speakers, I sort of roll my eyes, but it's totally true. Like, donors need to be thought of as your date, and they needed to be treated just like you would a relationship. It's totally cheesy, but it's true. So thinking about the different ways to cultivate a donor. So thinking about being super responsive, sending thank you notes right away, thank you notes either after a gift or after you meet somebody. Having a welcome letter. I've only seen one organization in my work do this, which is after the first gift is sending a welcome letter saying, thank you so much welcome to the family. This is more than just a tax letter. It's this is, you are part of our organization now. This is a great thing for board members to do. Being responsive and treating everybody like an individual, so really listening to folks and understanding where they're coming from, why they're connected to your organization, keeping them up to date. So one thing that I've noticed a lot of the times is that nonprofit people, you're so focused on what you're doing every day that you think that everybody else knows what you're doing every day too, and that's not necessarily true. So if you think about yourself as a donor, when do you hear from organizations when they want another gift, right? So being proactive and reaching out to them in multiple different ways, in between those asks, to make sure that they know what you're actually doing and to celebrate the successes with you. Don't be afraid to ask, listen, and thank all the time. I do so much thanking. And it has to be sincere, but those are the ways that donors feel a part of your organization. Anything else? All right, so I'm gonna go through this last
Cindy?
part pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a thank you note that doesn't include an ask.
Oh,
is,
yes.
Yeah, sometimes the minute you get a thank you, it's, and by the way, let's give more. Just separating those seems to be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and think about your own experience as a donor. That's huge. How would you want to be treated? And this is the hard stuff, right? This is the stuff that takes time. This is the stuff where you got to get out of your own brain and say, okay, I'm talking to donor X here. This is not just a person or not just a blank face. This is a person that I'm talking to. So going pretty quickly through this stuff, this is different than what I've been talking about before, but really thinking about increasing donor gifts once the donor feels welcome and a part of the organization. The keys to this is that it takes time. If you are seeking a major gift, especially a significant gift to the donor and to the organization, it might take a couple of years to really get that gift. So it's not going to happen overnight. It takes a lot of time and relationship building. Cultivation is key, so all those things that we just talked about, pieces. Thanking, and also don't forget to ask for the gift. I think a lot of times what happens is that we just assume that donors, know that we need the money, and if we don't ask them for it, or if we don't ask for a specific amount, they may not give, and sometimes, that's a little bit of a confusing place. Like, I thought they really liked us. Why aren't they giving us money? Well, when was the last time we asked them for another gift? And then major giving is something we're not going to totally go into today, but it follows the same rules. You got to treat people as individuals, and thank them in the same way.
I was going to say just about this previous slide, it seems like a lot of times if people know specifically, if there's a specific project that you're working on or something that requires a specific amount of funding, that's one way to, increase their donor gifts. If they know like we're working on something new that requires X amount, then they're usually like that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's part of, having donors feel like they're a part of the organization. So, it's much easier to say, we've been telling you that we're working on this project for the last, year. We're at the last level and we just need this amount to, meet our goal. Can you help us do that? Those are the type of things, being very specific. Yeah. All right. And then I'm just going to show you this as really what we call the major donor cycle, and there are variations on this, but really thinking about once you've identified a donor, and been introduced to them, really thinking about, breaking this down into steps of, cultivating the donor and then getting to a place where you and they feel ready to, make the ask for a gift. And then what happens after the gift? There's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of stewardship of the gift that happens, and then the cycle starts later. So this can be its own workshop, so I'm not gonna get way too into that right now. So I wanna do a time check. Do you think we have time? 10 minutes or no? I could go either way. Yeah, we do? Okay, great, yay. So we get to do the terrifying exercise. All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of role playing. So this is, as I said, terrifying to me, because basically, it sounds like a lot of folks in the room are just getting their feet wet in donor fundraising, and you may have never asked a person face-to-face for a donation. It's super scary, I think, and I think I don't want your first time doing this being in front of a donor. I want it to be in front of your peers here. So I'm gonna have you follow these very easy steps to make your ask. So step number 1, making a connection with the donor. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I know that your daughter has been very involved with our project. I'm really glad that you've been supportive of her, and I'm, so glad that you would be willing to meet with me today. Making connection to the mission. So, I know that you love your pets, and our pet cemetery is such a huge part of the community. We take such good care of pets as they leave this earth and into eternity, and we know that you're so that you connect to our mission that way. Make the ask. So as you know, we're really trying to expand the pet cemetery for another acre or 2. Is there any way that you could make a donation of $1 million to help us fund this? So step number 4, shut up. And this is really stop talking, let the donor think about what you've just asked them, and let them respond to it. So the opposite of this is, actually, I know that you've recently changed jobs, you've just moved back in with your mother. I know this is a really bad time to ask you. Actually, don't worry about it. I don't need the donation. So I'm sorry, that's obviously exaggerated, but there's some truth to that we can talk ourselves out of a donation. So what I want you to do is really just listen to your partner, give your response. If it's yes or no, whatever, say thank you, and you're done. So what I want you to do for number 3 is think about what amount of money scares you to ask for. It doesn't have to do anything with your current project or your budget or anything, but think about, for me, it's $1 million. That's such a huge amount of money. I have no idea what that even looks like. So for me, that was the hurdle that I had to get over, just to say it out loud. So I want you to find a partner and get 2 minutes each. I will tell you when to switch. Yes, question?
Yeah, I really like points 3 and 4. I was wondering if there, for number 2, is there an appropriate amount of time? Because if you want to shut up and listen, right, you don't want to take a whole lot of time to get to number 4. You don't want to talk for 30 minutes and then you get to number 4 and shut up. So, but at the same time, some of the projects are a little bit more detailed than an extra acre of pet cemetery, right? And so I'm wondering, is there a guideline of how much detail you go into and how much time you should take at that point?
Yeah, I would say, it's based on your relationship with the donor. So I've sat in front of a donor and I could tell that she's ready for me to make the ask. So there wasn't much that I needed to say, that's what we were there to do. Sometimes there is, you have to do the elevator speech. there might be some back and forth, some questions, really just making sure that they understand what they're there for, so.
Is it key to prep the person you're meeting with, that something is going to be going on? I've done it both ways. The first time I asked anyone, and it was a friend, I just kind of popped it on him at the end of the lunch that we had.
Sure.
Not so good. He did give because he was a friend. But the other times, it was letting people know we're going to be